Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. Today, actually, is Wednesday, uh, and today is Wednesday, September the 17th, right? Had the wrong date up there, or the wrong day. Here we go. Today is Wednesday, the September the 17th, and we have this opportunity to spend this morning together. So it's always a great thing, never taking it for granted. But I trust you guys are waking up feeling refreshed and ready to seize this new day. And as we do, we're in a new series called Why I Trust the Bible. And we began just taking a look back at at the events of last week, tragic of events that saw this young Ukrainian woman, just stabbed to death on a train, for no reason. Brings all kinds of thoughts of, you know, mental health and you know public violence here. It's just um, it, it it's just hard, isn't it? Like when you start thinking about it. Charlie Kirk's assassination, the school shooting in Colorado, just all these things, they just pile up together, and it just makes you think like, well, the evil is winning. And so I took this moment to as just as a prelude to the series itself, to just talk about a few things that I think would help us to maintain perspective. And one was taking a look at the world as Jesus saw it. And that was from Matthew chapter 13. And we looked at this parable of the wheat and the weeds, and a great parable that um, when Jesus talks about this owner of a field, sowing down good seed, goes to sleep in the middle of the night, and his enemy comes, and his enemy, sows all this bad seed. And when the wheat and the weeds begin to grow, the servants come and says, "Lord, I thought you planted good seed. Why is there all this bad seed in the ground?" Right? And can you not hear Christians today saying, "Lord, if you're God, why are all these terrible things happening?" Um, and how does Jesus reply? He says, "Listen, the enemy did this." And then they said, "Well, you want us to pull out the weeds?" And he says, "No." He says, "Wait till the harvest. When the harvest comes, we'll separate the weeds from the wheat." And and then later, he begins to explain the parable to his disciples. The one who sows the good seed is Jesus himself. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. The the bad seed is the sons of the evil one. And the evil one here is the enemy. His enemy is referred to as the devil. And the word devil is one who falsely accuses, and he's been doing that since the very beginning of time. And so here we have this stage set up, right? This animosity between God and his enemy, right, which is the devil. And and the field, he says, is the world. The day of harvest is going to come at the end of the age. And at the end of the age, he says he's going to send his angels, and they will separate the weeds from the wheat. So the parable begins to play itself out, and it's displaying a world where the wheat and the weeds are growing side by side. And it's not a pleasant feeling to be in that kind of world. There are patches, right, where you could find some real sense of peace, but there are others where there's so much turmoil. And yet you realize God saying that it's going to come to the end of the age that all of this is going to be reconciled. So what does that say? It's telling us we're going to have to wait to see some kind of ultimate reconciliation. And not only that, he also tells us it's not our job to go out and pull up the weeds. That's a job that he has already assigned to his angels. They'll do it. In fact, he tells us why. He says, because you could be pulling up the wheat when you think you're pulling up the weeds. Interesting contrast, right, between wheat and tares. They kind of look the same, and when they're first growing. So Jesus says, no, it's not for you to do that. So now you begin to recognize, all right, then my job is to do what? I need to make certain that I am recognized as a son, a daughter of the king, that I live my life in a way that demonstrates I am this faithful stalk of wheat. And that is what should preoccupy my days. Am I living in a way that bears testimony to this calling that Jesus has on my life? Or am I demonstrating the characteristics of these weeds that are in opposition to God's will and his purposes? It's not like the weed could sit there in the field and saying, I'm a weed, I'm a weed. No, because you look at him, you know he's a weed. He's behaving like a weed. No, no, God is saying to you and me that our job in this world is to make sure that we are demonstrating uh, to whom we belong. All right. Now, having said that, I want you to think about a couple of things with me, because so far we've talked about seeing the world as God sees it, right? And then yesterday we talked about this passage from Matthew 13:14, where it says, reflect on the narrow path that Jesus described. And we began to consider the challenges and rewards of following Jesus's teachings and choosing the path that leads to life. I gave this example, right, of walking through the dunes, at a beach, and they're overgrown, and you can't see anything but the dunes around you, and it's this little narrow path, and you're on this path, and you almost forget where you are until you come to the end of that path, and it opens up on the sandy beach, and the ocean is expansive in front of you. You realize, to me, that was a picture that spoke to me about why this narrow road is so much better than the broad way. See, when you first read the parable, right, that Jesus gives us, the parable is one where he says, "Don't enter in through the wide gate and travel on the broad road," because he says the broad way, it says it has a lot of company, but it's leading to destruction. And he says that unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are finding it. Why? Because the Broadway, it's a come as you are, do your thing. To enter into the narrow gate, no, no, you have to unburden yourself with what you're carrying. You're going to have to walk on this narrow road that has been defined by Jesus. And sometimes, if you contrast it to, you're like, man, this is so restricting. I'd much rather be on the Broadway. But take a look on the Broadway. If it leads to destruction, it's not like everybody's happy until the very end, because they still have to contend with a broken world just like you and me. And so you begin to see, how do people deal with that anxiety and fear? How do they deal with jealousies and envies and the malice of the world around us? How do we deal with the slander, right? At the violence? Yeah, you're sometimes left back thinking there's got to be more to this world than this. So the Broadway, it's not all that shines, right? You know, the lights are not always that bright on Broadway. Yeah. I I I, I recently I had a trip. We went down to Las Vegas, and walking along the strip, and it's just filled with so much activity, like 24/7. But if you look, outside of all that glimmers, I remember this one scene vividly. Just walking down, we had a really nice dinner. Walking down, and this young girl, obviously strung out on drugs, just, you know, in her appearance, just bearing all the marks of somebody who is, you know, totally addicted, just unkept, skinny, just, it was, and you could tell the girl probably was in her 20s. It was so sad in the midst of all this opulence. I remember the same feeling one time having we went to St. Martin, and we went to this one, place in St. Martin, and they had all these fancy stores, but if you went down 2 blocks from the stores, there was all these, like, little shacks broken down, and you're thinking, "Yeah, the world, man, there's such a disparity, and there's such a brokenness." Yeah, it just makes you live in wanting to see it all reconciled and redeemed, and yet, again, what's the world that Jesus sees? He's saying, "Until that day that the end comes, this is the way life is gonna be." But for you, you have to let your light shine. You gotta do what you can in the time that we have to bear witness of this hope that we have in Christ, which means then we go out into the world and we love our neighbor as we love ourselves. We take that extra mile, right? We give the cloth off our back. We begin to love your enemies. A hard road, but that's the only way that a weed is ever going to have the possibility of becoming a wheat. It's you and me demonstrating that there is this spiritual life that God is bringing, and God could do that. God could turn that weed into a wheat. And why am I so confident? Because he did it for me. And and I'm sure that many of you who are watching this morning, you'd say, "Yeah, he's done it for me too." I'm not that same person. And I may still have a ways to go, but I know what I once was, and now in my heart, I know that Jesus has changed me. So the challenges, of choosing the narrow path, they're minimal when we consider this eternal weight of glory that God has prepared for us. It says, in a text that I'm going to read to you this morning, it talks about the glories of God being with us. So turn with me to this passage here in Romans chapter 5 as we continue with this series, Why I Trust the Bible. So in Romans chapter 5, I want you to see this text here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to read this to you, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. But before I do that, I'm gonna put another text up here, because I think it sets a context a little bit better. So I'm gonna put this passage up here, and I believe it's from John's Gospel. Let me just make sure I do this correctly here. Yeah, this is good. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to put it up on a screen so that you would have it. It's John chapter 15. And if you look at John 15, verses 18 and 19, I'd like to use that as an introduction before we begin looking at Romans 5. So if you would, just turn to John chapter 15. And this whole idea now is we've determined that the world that Jesus sees is one that is this mixed bag, that we're going to have to find this path through this world. And it's not always going to be pleasant. But he says, just choose the right path, right? The path that Jesus says, I have defined for you, because you walk on this narrow path, and it's going to lead to life and abundance. It's going to lead to this place where you're going to experience this full redemption that he is promising. You just got to trust him. So then you turn around and say, well, is it worth it? Is it really worth it? Because I look around, and sometimes life on the narrow road, it doesn't seem as appealing in the short run. And then you start thinking, well, I'm getting older. Like, am I going to put all my chips in this basket? Well, let me tell you what Jesus says in John chapter 15. And this is on the day before he is going to be crucified. And he looks at them because now he understands this in not just in words, and this isn't just metaphor. This is reality, because the people have already conspired against him. The chief priests and the elders, the teachers of the law, they have gathered together and they have sold Jesus out. And they have made plot. They are plotting now to kill him. And he knows that before this night is over, he is going to be arrested. He's going to be mocked, flogged, and ultimately crucified. But he knows this is why I came. He will leave this conversation in John 15, and he will travel to the Garden of Gethsemane, where he pleads with the Lord, if there be another way, let this cup pass from me. And in the midst of those prayers where he is petitioning the Father, he resolves in his own heart, he says, not my will, but thine be done. And even all of his disciples who are sleeping in the moment, who you think would after 3 years of seeing him teach and perform miracles and demonstrate the kindnesses that he did, that would have been enough for them to show a fidelity to Jesus. But it just goes to show, right, how hard it is for us to wean ourselves from this world. And, maybe in my youth, I may have been tempted to think, oh, I wouldn't have done that. But no, like I look at Peter, and he was the most obstinate, right? Like, hey, Lord, I will never, everybody else can fall away, but I will never, fall away. Yeah, and he's the guy that is denying the Lord 3 times. So, listen, this is not about our personal strength. This is about a reliance on God to do what he says he's going to do. But Jesus is giving you some hints here. And notice what he says in John 15, verses 18 to 19. He says, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. Right? This is almost like a rhetorical question. It's because the world is going to hate you. Why? Because you are proposing a way to life, this narrow road, as opposed to this broad way. You are out there warning people that life on the Broadway, while it may seem appealing, that road is going to lead to destruction. And do you think the people on the Broadway are like, they're going to look at you saying, you should keep your mouth shut? And who asked you? Nobody asked for your opinion. Thank you very much, man. I'm living my own life. And yet, it's like walking by a house on fire knowing a family is inside. You can't just walk away. You have to say something. You got to try and help to rescue those who are inside. And I get it. It's not all of my responsibility to save people, but if I don't even talk to them about the hope that is in me, if I'm not demonstrating my life, and sometimes it's not even that you're challenging people, it's just that you're not going to go along with the program. Sorry, I'm not going to do that. Like in my relationship with Jesus, he's already told me to put a hedge around my life. This is not an exit that I should be taking. And so by just not going along with the program, don't you feel some heat for that? Oh, you think you're better than we are, don't you? Oh, you think that your life is so perfect. Who do you think you are? And come on, you grow up in this world and you can begin to see why there is so much tension. You're not loving, you're unkind. Why? Because I'm holding to a standard that God has said from the very beginning is one in which he told his people, if you walk in this way, I will cause you to thrive. I will bless you. Did God not begin that way with Israel? And yet they turned their backs on him. When Israel was walking in covenant with God, he made even their enemies to be at peace with them. All the hardships that they would experience is because they had demonstrated an infidelity. They had become spiritual adulterers. They were hooking up with the world, and they were leaving God in the rearview mirror. Yeah, see, this is why the world hates you. It's not because you are so antagonistic. In fact, you're out there trying to be kind. You're trying to do the right thing. And yet the weeds don't want to have anything to do with it. Why? Because they are representative of their father, who is the false accuser. That's why this parable that Jesus gave us is so significant, because you realize that the devil he is in opposition to Jesus's agenda. He wants to do everything he can to destroy that. So if I'm representing Jesus, don't you see then it's like we all have this like target. And Jesus says, listen, blessed are they who are persecuted, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men insult you and say all manners of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because they persecuted the prophets before you. I read those passages and I'm thinking, is this worth it? This is a cost of discipleship. And this is how you begin to see, am I a wheat or am I a weed? And so Jesus is telling them straight up, listen, if the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belong to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. And so, don't you see here, just in John chapter 15 alone, it's given you all these reasons why there is this antagonism. And it's not that anything that you even are looking for. It's just by virtue of the fact that you are trying to align yourself more and more with God's will and purposes. It causes you to have to make decisions that says, I can't walk on the Broadway. As tempting as it might be, as alluring as it might be, God is saying, no, I've called you to walk on this narrow path. This path that I am placing you on. So when you begin to reflect on this cost of following Jesus, you recognize, wow, there are some challenges, and there's going to be some disappointments, because you're not given the free rein to just go and do your own thing. I am now. My life needs to be reflective of the life that Jesus lived, and that was hard. So we have to consider the challenges and sufferings that come with being a disciple of Jesus. It means that sometimes you're going to be the brunt of people's jokes. You're going to be made fun of as being naive or narrow-minded. But I'm only as narrow-minded as the narrow road. I have already seen in real time the benefit of following Jesus. Even though sometimes there's no guarantee that the road is going to be smooth, right? But I know that the mission is clear and that the goal is heaven. That my companions may be few, and the way may be rough, and the road narrow, but my companion is with me, and I will stand, because he will be my strength in my days of weakness. So whatever challenges that I face as a disciple of Jesus, when I compare them with the glory that will one day be expressed to me in its fullest measure, I don't want to be there empty-handed. I want to be standing in that space to hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And we're not talking about perfection, because there's only one perfect. His name is Jesus. But because he is perfect, he opened up that door, and now he beckons you and me to come. But you got to make sure that I am working out my salvation with fear and trembling, that I am not capitulating to the world around me, but I'm like instead of being, like they say, the thermometer that reads the temperature, I'm the thermostat. I'm setting the temperature. And you're going to set that for your life. You're going to set that for the relationships that you find yourself in, and all of us together. So haven't we experienced transformation along this spiritual journey? Hasn't it changed us? What the things that you love the most? I think of sometimes the ambitions that we experience in this life, and how unhealthy some ambitions can be, that they actually rob us of life. Like anything, you put all your emphasis on some of these things, and what happens? You begin to recognize, wow, I thought I was going to gain something here, and I wound up losing. I lost time. I lost, maybe a reputation, because I decided to go on the Broadway for a season. And God, in his graciousness, sometimes disciplines those whom he loves. And that discipline is not pleasant. But afterwards, it says, we are refined. We are made stronger. Think of Peter. I mentioned his denial, but when God restored him and he came back, he recognized, I can't go around pompously like I did in my youth, saying what I'm going to do and what I'm not going to do, because he already showed himself to have feet of clay. But he recognized where his strength was ultimately going to be found, and that was going to be in a relationship with Jesus. And so Peter wasn't perfect. He would still have his, I think famously of his interaction with the Apostle Paul, when Paul calls him out because of his fraternizing with the Jewish believers and ignoring the Gentiles when his Jewish brothers were around. Paul calls him out. But there's no denying that Peter was steadfast. He turned out to be that rock that would go to the hard places in this world and shed his light. And by doing so, many people got off of that Broadway, and they found the narrow way that led to life. So the question then, and our prayer, right, is when we reflect on the transformative power that takes place in our discipleship, right, in our persevering along the spiritual journey, is it worth it? And our prayer should be that we persevere, that we have strength in the face of challenges, so that we would have a deeper understanding of the hope and the joy that's found in Jesus. Well, tomorrow I'd like to do that with you. I'd like to take a look at this Romans 5 and talk about, this whole idea of if it's worth it. And we'll read that together. So I want to thank you so much for joining me this morning on this Wednesday, September the 17th. Trust that throughout this day, you'll be thinking of this analogy of the narrow road and the broad way, and that you would choose wisely. My friends, thank you so much for being a part of this community. And I pray that you feel his presence in abundance. Seize the day and never forget that God is good all the time. God bless you, my friends. Lord willing, we'll spend some more time again tomorrow. God bless.